This time on the laboratory, we are going to be working on a monsters ball from Lemax. It's got intermittent turning issues. The characters are still in the box. I don't need the characters to demonstrate the problem. So I have to start it, and eventually it'll stop. See, and this guy and this rotates with it. So this is really easy to take apart. There's 9 screws on the bottom. I've already removed them just to shorten the video's length, since these videos get long. Take out the hook, take your characters all off, including the guy here with the axe. It just slides right up. Unplug your power. Okay. And if you flip it over, what's nice about this one is you can rest it on its back and get to the bottom. But there's 9 screws, all 6 outcroppings, 2 in the bottom, 1 in the front. Now I've already, like I said, removed them just to make it a little faster. Most likely it's got a bad belt and possibly a bad gear, because when it does spin continuously, every once in a while it goes clunk. So when you lift it off though, be careful. There is a wire over here on the side. So you got to unplug from the circuit board. And then this whole top section comes right off. And we're going to get it out of the way. Like so. This is the shaft that feeds up that this connects into. Like that. So it's the extension. Here is the base. This goes right here. This just lifts straight up. On the bottom is a whole bunch of gears, as you can see. This rotates, this gear right here rotates all the magnetic discs. And then this bigger gear is driven, and that rotates this entire plate. Now, this drive gear right here, you can either slide back on that shaft or make sure it's lined up right here on this pin. I'll just slide it back on here, because we're going to store this upside down to keep all the gears clean and free of debris. And this belt seems to be a little on the weak side. It's kind of stretched and there's a lot of black powder, which usually indicates it's been burning because it's been slipping. So we're going to plug it back in real quick. So you need to plug in that little wire. Yeah, see, belt's wobbling, so it needs a new belt. I'm going to leave this right here so I can keep this plugged in and still have a little slack on it. Belt's pretty easy to get to. You just got to remove all these screws, which there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. When I had it running, it runs better without the figures because of the slipping belt, but there's a clacking sound. The clacking sound could be the slapping belt because it's stretched, or it could be there's a crack in one of these gears. And there's a lot of gears in here. As you saw, there's a whole bunch in the bottom disc. Then you got a worm gear drive here, worm gear drive here, and there's gear mechanisms that go all the way up to this shaft, which I'm going to pull out and set aside. So there's a lot of gears that might have a chipped or cracked tooth, and we're going to have to check them all. Might as well, since we're going to have it mostly apart. This big gear right here is set up as an eccentric gear. This guy rotates back and forth, and that's how this gear works. Is when it turns, it slides in this shaft, if you've never seen one, which then allows this to move back and forth. And this is the arc right here that this character moves back and forth. It's very similar to an oscillating fan. If you ever take the cover off, it looks very similar to that. So we're going to check this, which is really tight. Make sure this guy is intact, not chipped or cracked. Might put a little grease on this. This thing slips. This is what spins, and there's a lot of rubbing, but there's no lubrication. So probably put some lubrication right in here to help make this a little easier. Once you get this cover off, the belt and the pulley come out with the worm gear, and there's a little bit black on the belt pulley, and that's from this thing slipping. So we're going to get a new belt, which I have a couple already out. So a little bit smaller, it's a little bit thicker too, tighter belt. But before I put the belt in, I want to do an inspection on all these gears and see if we can see what the clicking sound is. Generally, a clicking sound in most Lemax or any animated house is you have a crack. And when the crack goes across the adjoining gear, the stress causes the crack to open, which in turn gives you that click. Now this is a different style gear than a lot of them have. This uses a basic base gear, and the 10 tooth that's always breaking on these is actually integrated into the gear itself. So if it broke, you could, if you broke this top gear, you could technically cut it at the joint right in here and then glue another 10 tooth on top of it, because finding this integrated gear is going to be really hard. There's no identification part numbers on it. So let's continue looking at all the gears. Let's see if we can figure out what that clacking sound is. Sounds good. All the teeth look good so far. And the clacking, like I said, could have just been the motor slap, the belt slap, sorry, from the motor. Make sure those are tight. And let's get this reassembled and test it. I'm not going to put the belt on, because if I pull the belt over with nothing supporting this, it just pulls this out like that. As you see, it lifts. So I'm just getting the belt set onto the pulley, or in the pulley's area, and then we're going to drop this back on. But before I do that, like I said, I want to put a dab of lubrication on this. That. This is just a dielectric grease. I use dielectric or lithium. I don't have any white lithium grease at the moment, so I'm just going to put a drop of this on there just to help lubricate it. Try to stay away from any silicone lubricants. I find that they do not work as well, especially on the plastic parts. some of the plastic parts to break down. Oh, that's a lot nicer now. Much smoother. Of course, now it's on my fingers, so everything's slick. Okay, push the cover on. These two tabs here and these two tabs here actually make a positive connection because they're cupped. These out here are just flat. Make the screws snug, don't over torque them, you'll crack the plastic. Just basic information. All these screws are the same, so if you mix them up, don't worry about them. There's no differences. You know, some products, one screw's longer than the next one, or 3 screws are one size and 2 screws are a different one. Yeah, these are all the same. So, same with the bottom. You don't have to worry about mixing them up. They're all the same screw. Now I got most of them on. Let's put on this belt. That much tighter. On a lot of pieces where the animatronics slow down or stop completely, it's usually a belt. Not always, but usually. Alright, so that's turning, that's turning, that's turning. It sounds a little bit better. Now when you put this in, this hole right here is for this pin. These metal bars that are surrounding these plates is to keep this centered from walking out, and the edge of this plate actually slides on these 4 standoffs. So the easiest way to do it is to come in at a slight angle so you can see the hole for that center pin, and just walk it over and drop it in. Like so. And so you can see this is, hopefully you can see this is moving back and forth slowly, which moves the guy with the axe. This is rotating slowly, which moves the rotating dragon. And then these plate is moving one way and the magnetic discs are spinning the opposite on those planetary gears, and it's much quieter. You don't have that clacking sound. So the clacking was just that belt slapping because it had stretched. Generally belts either clack because they're stretched, or they vulcanize and they break. So it's one of the two. I'll turn it back off, and we're going to put the top back on. Unplug that wire because you have to lift this whole unit over this shaft and line it up. And when you set it back down, plug it back in. Make sure this wire doesn't stick out the sides. Like so. Get the bottom. Make sure it's sitting flat. I got some debris on it. And we'll put these pieces back in so you can see the motion. There's that one. Now this guy I'm only going to rest on top so I can see his arc and then adjust him as necessary. Okay, he's swinging too far out. So that's the end of his arc. So I'm going to turn him back just a hair. This is a pretty neat piece. I like the red, green, blue lights that flash on the dance floor. I'm not a fan of these flickering things. If you're epileptic, these things will definitely trigger a seizure. They are really, really bad. I do like strobe lights, but I think it's too much for this unit. That's a personal preference. Has nothing to do with epilepsy or anything. I just don't care for it. But the dance floor lights are pretty cool. So the plate's not skipping, jumping, or slipping, and he's got his arc back. So it's that easy to take apart and test. All you have to do is remove all the screws from the bottom, lift this carefully, unplug the wire in this back corner, so it'd be the right rear if it's facing you like this. Lift it, remove the 8 screws, change out that belt. Belts you can get online, you can get them from different hobby stores, you can get packages of different size belts. And you can also, like Skull Crane Animatronics sells belt kits. Just get a generic belt that's approximately the same length. You measure a belt, usually, like on an old car, you measure it like this. You pull it taut, don't stretch it, and that's your dimension. Sometimes they want the circumference, so you have to like take a piece of string. But this one's just stretched and it's really hard. It's lost some of its elasticity, so that's why it's been slipping. So relatively easy fix, just a slipping belt. Easy to get into. I'm going to put the screws back in the bottom, put it back in its box, get it back to its owner. But I wanted to show you real quick how you can easily fix your Monsters ball if it has a slipping or intermittent turning problem. And if it's clacking, check all those gears for a potential crack. If you have a cracked gear, you might have a harder time finding some of them, but a lot of hobby kits do carry them. Just count the teeth. The biggest thing is you need to know your teeth, how many you have, the diameter of the gear, and the thickness of the gear. Micrometer works the best, but if you have a metric ruler, that'll work too, because 90% of all gears out there are metric measured. So count the teeth, measure the thickness, measure the diameter, and you can usually find a kit that'll have that specific gear in it. So, other than that, thanks for watching. Until the next one, and if you have any questions, put them below or send us an email. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Have a good one.